The dog started barking just after midnight, a deep warning bark that rolled through the Montana Valley like thunder. Colton Sterling rose from his bed, grabbed his cold peacemaker, and moved through the dark hall with the calm of a man born ready for trouble. He expected a wolf or a thief. What he found instead was a woman collapsed on his porch, soaked in rain, bleeding, and clutching a canvas bag like her life depended on it. He stepped closer, lowering his gun. She was thin, dangerously light when he scooped her into his arms, mud dripping from her tattered dress. Lightning flashed as he carried her inside. Her hair was plastered to her face, her skin pale from cold, but what struck him most was the grip she had on that bag. Even unconscious, she held it with the stubbornness of someone who'd fought her whole life. As he laid her on the leather sofa near the fireplace, her eyes slowly opened. They weren't soft, begging eyes like the women who traveled miles to marry him. These eyes were sharp, wild, and terrified. She scrambled backward, reaching for a knife hidden under her skirt. Colton raised both hands. "You're safe," he said. "You're at the Bar S Ranch." She looked around the room. The chandelier, the bearskin rug, the polished wood. Most women looked at those things with hunger. She looked at them with panic. "I can't stay here," she rasped. "You can barely stand," Colton said. "I don't want your charity," she snapped. "I'll pay you. I can cook. I can clean. I can work. Just don't ask where I came from." Her voice cracked. Her hands trembled. Her fear wasn't of him. It was of whoever she'd left behind. "Name?" Colton asked. "Mary," she said after a pause. "Just Mary." "Fine," he said, "but you're bleeding on my rug." She looked down and saw the dark stain spreading along her side. She didn't even flinch. It was the first clue she wasn't ordinary. Colton pointed upstairs. "Guest room. You're staying there tonight. When the storm is gone, we'll talk about stalls and cooking." She hesitated, then nodded. For a moment he thought she might collapse again, but she forced herself upright and followed him. What he didn't know was that the moment she stepped into his house, his life changed forever. 3 days earlier, Colton had stood on this same porch with a cigar in his hand, watching a dust cloud rise on the long road from Billings. Another carriage. Another wealthy suitor. Another woman trying to marry the king of Montana. At 32, Colton owned 40,000 acres along the Yellowstone River. His cattle empire made newspapers on both coasts. Everywhere he went, women stared at him like he was made of gold. They traveled in silk dresses, smelling of perfume and ambition. They called him handsome. They called him mysterious. They called him the richest bachelor in the territory. He called them liars. Not one of them wanted him. They wanted the ranch. Dutch, his old foreman, stood beside him that afternoon. "Telegraph says the lady coming today is Miss Clementine Vanderwall," Dutch said. "Her daddy owns half the steel in Pittsburgh." Colton didn't blink. "Send her back." "She came 3,000 miles, Dutch muttered. "Least you could do is offer her lemonade." "I run a ranch, not a hotel," Colton said. The carriage rolled up. The driver opened the door. A woman stepped out, drowning in blue silk and lavender perfume. "Ah!" She smiled with all the confidence of someone who never heard the word no. "Mr. Sterling," she purred. "You've seen the wilderness," Colton said. "Now, turn around." Her smile cracked. Her cheeks flushed pink. "Excuse me? You're here for a merger, not a husband," he said. "Driver, take her back to the station," she gasped. "Do you know who I am? You're the 23rd woman this year to waste my time." He didn't stay to watch her sputter or cry. He was used to it. They came. They begged. They cried. They left. He thought the day was over. He didn't know a storm was coming, one that had nothing to do with rain. By the third morning after the mysterious woman arrived, Colton expected her to rest, maybe demand tea and comfort like the others. Instead, Dutch found her scrubbing pots in the kitchen at 4 in the morning. By noon, she was reorganizing the pantry. By evening, she was in the yard chopping wood with perfect form. Colton watched her through his study window. She worked harder than half his men. She flinched whenever a rider passed. She hid when a stranger approached. Not a criminal, he thought. Not swagger. Fear. Someone was hunting her. He walked out to her. She didn't hear him over the thud of the axe. When she turned, she lifted it defensively before lowering it again. "I'm paying for my room," she said breathlessly. "I told you I don't need payment, and I told you I don't take charity." They stood toe to toe, breathing hard. Her eyes blazed. She didn't care about his money. She didn't care about his land. She didn't even seem impressed by his name. It was the first time in years a woman hadn't tried to charm him. It shook him to his core. "Fine," he said. "If you want to work, the cook quit last week. $5 a week, room and board. But you eat with me." She hesitated. "I eat in the kitchen." "No," he said. "At my table. That's the deal." She reluctantly agreed. That night, as she sat across from him at the long mahogany table, her hands trembling slightly as she cut her food, Colton saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't running from poverty. She was running from a man. And whoever he was, he'd nearly destroyed her. The fire crackled in the long dining room, as Abigail, still pretending to be Mary, kept her eyes lowered. Colton watched her carefully, noticing the way she kept one hand close to the canvas bag she'd brought with her. He noticed the way she flinched when a floorboard creaked, the way she never put her back to a window. She wasn't a servant. She wasn't a traveler. She was a woman who had lived through something that would make most people crumble. "Where are you from?" Colton asked, cutting his steak. She paused. "Somewhere else." "So you're running." "I said I wasn't a criminal." "I didn't say you were." Her fork slipped from her hands. Her shoulders tightened. "I don't want trouble," she whispered. "I just want to earn my keep." Colton leaned forward. "You don't fool me. I know men, and I know fear. Whoever hurt you, he's still close, isn't he?" She shot up from the table. "Thank you for the meal. I'll clear the plates." "Sit down," Colton said, his voice deep. "I'm your employee, not your prisoner. You're a woman alone in Montana territory with a bullet graze and a fake name," he said. "Tell me what happened." Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. "If he finds me," she whispered, "he'll burn your ranch to the ground just to spite me." "Who?" Colton asked. She shook her head, fear choking her voice. "My husband." The word hit him like a punch. She stared into the fire, trembling. "He has money, men, power, judges in his pocket. If he knows I'm here—" Colton didn't let her finish. "He'll have to get through me first." For the first time, she looked at him with something other than fear, trust. Over the next few days, she became part of the ranch without even meaning to. She cooked without being asked, chopped wood before the men woke, scrubbed the floors, swept the barns, and helped the hands mend fences. The ranch hands adored her. They called her Miss Mary, even though Colton knew that wasn't her name. She laughed with them sometimes, small, fragile laughs, but each time hoofbeats sounded from the road, she froze like prey waiting for the hunter. Colton felt a protectiveness he hadn't felt in years. He didn't understand it. He didn't want to understand it. But it was there every time she walked by. Then, on the seventh day, everything changed. Colton was in town to pick up supplies. He stepped into the general store and froze. A fresh poster was on the wall. A missing woman. A reward offered by her loving husband. A pencil sketch of Mary. Except the name below wasn't Mary. It was Abigail Rock, wife of Jebediah Rock, a man who owned more judges than cattle. Colton ripped the poster off the wall. His jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The shopkeeper swallowed hard. "Trouble, Mr. Sterling?"
"No," Colton said.
"Just trash." He stuffed the poster into his coat and rode home fast. Abigail was in the corral breaking a Mustang when he arrived. Dust swirled around her, her hair loose, her face streaked with sweat and dirt. She looked free for the first time since she'd arrived. Colton rode straight toward her. She saw his expression, and her smile disappeared. She slid off the horse. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice shaking. He didn't speak. He pulled the crumpled poster from his coat and held it out. Her breath left her body in one shattered gasp. She stared at the sketch. at her real name, at the lies printed beneath it about hysteria and delusions. "It's all lies," Abigail whispered. "I'm not crazy. I ran because he owns everything. Sheriff, judges, Pinkertons. I thought if you knew who he was, you'd send me back like everyone else did." "I'm not everyone else," Colton said. She broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and desperate. She turned away, running for the house, but Colton caught her arm gently. "Let me go!" she cried. "He'll destroy you!" "Let him try." She froze, staring at him. "I don't run from men like him," Colton said, "and you're not running anymore." Her lips trembled. "He's coming, Colton. He'll find me." Colton brushed her hair back, his touch softer than he intended. "Then we'll be ready." That night, Colton gathered his men in the study.
"The woman staying with us is Jebediah Rock's wife," Colton said.
"He's coming. He's bringing hired guns." Dutch let out a long whistle. "Heard of him. Railroad money. Ruthless as they come. No shame if any man wants to ride out," Colton said. Not one man moved. They all stayed. The ranch turned into a fortress. Rifles in the windows, scouts on the hills, ammo stacked beside every doorway. Abigail helped pack cartridges. Her hands trembled, but her jaw was set. She wasn't running, not this time. 3 days later, dust rose on the horizon. 12 riders, a black carriage. Jebediah Rock himself stepped out, dressed in a perfect gray suit, looking at Colton like he was a piece of cattle to be bought. "I'm here for my wife," Rock said calmly. "She's not going anywhere," Colton answered. "I'll pay you," Rock said. 5,000. "Keep your money." Rock's smile finally cracked. "This cowboy fantasy ends today. Abigail, come out to your husband." The door opened. Abigail walked out with a Winchester rifle in her hands. She stood beside Colton. Rock's face twisted with rage. "You prefer him?" he spat. "This filthy rancher?" Abigail lifted the rifle. Her voice was steady. "I prefer a man." Rock lunged. His men reached for their guns. But Colton didn't step back. He stepped forward. "You cross that fence," he said, "and we're done talking." The standoff hung in the air like lightning before it strikes. And in that moment, Colton realized something. He wasn't just protecting Abigail. He loved her. For 3 long seconds, no one in the valley breathed. The wind rushed across the Yellowstone grass and rattled the fence posts while the two men stared each other down. Jebediah Rock stood stiff and furious, his polished boots spotless in the dirt. Colton Sterling stood with his Winchester resting in one hand, his jaw tight, the whole weight of the ranch behind him. Rock was the first to step back. He saw the glint of rifles in the barn loft. He saw the silhouettes of men watching from the ridge. He saw Abigail, his wife, his possession, standing beside another man with fire in her eyes. He wasn't winning today, but men like Jebediah Rock didn't need bullets to ruin lives. "I will bankrupt you," Rock hissed. "I will starve this ranch until you beg me to take her back." Then he turned, climbed into his carriage, and was gone. Colton didn't bother picking up the bag of gold Rock had thrown at his feet. He just muttered, "War's here." It began quietly. No gunshots, no explosions, just doors closing in their faces. The bank refused Colton's loan. The general store suddenly had no flour, no coffee, no nails. The blacksmith didn't have time to shoe their horses. Rose's men lingered in town, watching, waiting, spreading threats like wildfire. The Bar S Ranch wasn't under siege by soldiers, but by money. Abigail saw the effect immediately. Men became restless. Supplies ran low. Every rider from town returned with tension in their shoulders. One night she found Colton in the barn, sitting alone on a hay bale with his head down. It startled her. Colton Sterling was not a man who looked defeated. "I should go," she whispered. "If I leave, he'll stop." Colton lifted his head slowly, his eyes dark with something deeper than anger. "You think I'd let you walk back to that monster? You're losing everything," she said. "The ranch, your men, Your peace. He stood and walked to her, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. I spent a decade building fences, cattle lines, and a name that people feared, he said softly. But none of it meant a damn thing until the night you crawled on my porch. Her breath caught. You're not going anywhere, he said. Not now. Not ever. His kiss came suddenly, rough at first, desperate, like he'd been holding it in for years. Then gentle. Abigail clung to him, her hands trembling against his shirt. For the first time in her life, a man wasn't holding her down. He was holding her up. Before dawn the next morning, Colton gathered 20 ranch hands in the bunkhouse. Rock cut us off from the railroad in Billings, he said, but he doesn't own the line in Casper. If we get the herd there, we survive. Dutch scratched his beard. Boss, that's 200 miles, and Rowe's men will try to stop us, Colton added. This isn't a cattle drive. It's a fight. Every man nodded. Abigail stepped forward wearing a borrowed hat, pants tucked into boots, and a bandolier across her chest. I'm coming, she said. Abigail, you ride, I ride, she said firmly. If I stay here, Rowe will just burn the ranch down. Colton stared at her, then nodded. Saddle up. The cattle drive was hell. Dust storms, all sleepless nights. Harassment from riders on distant ridges. Gunshots in the dark. Men shouted warnings while the herd stirred restlessly. On the fourth night, an explosion lit the sky with a thunderous crack. Dynamite. The herd panicked immediately, stampeding toward a canyon drop-off. Turn them! Colton roared, galloping into the chaos. The earth shook with the pounding of thousands of hooves. Abigail rode dangerously close to the front, waving her hat, shouting, firing a shot into the air to push the lead steers away from the cliff. Gunfire rained from the ridges. Rock's men were shooting into the cattle, driving them wild. A steer stumbled right in front of Abigail's horse. Her horse reared and threw her into the dirt. Abigail! Colton screamed. Without thinking, he plunged into the stampede. Abigail had bad words and books. His horse dodged horns and hooves with impossible luck. He leaned down, snatched her by the arm, and hauled her onto the saddle just as the herd thundered over the spot she had fallen. Her arms wrapped around his waist, her body shaking violently. You with me? He shouted. Her voice trembled. I'm here. Together they pushed the cattle away from the cliff until the herd finally slowed. The ranch survived the night. Barely. The next day they reached Devil's Pass, granite cliffs on both sides. A perfect trap. Colton scouted ahead and found Rock's men positioned above the narrow trail, 20 gunmen with the high ground. If they rode through, they'd be slaughtered. Unless someone distracted them. A terrible idea formed. I'll do it, Abigail said immediately when he explained. No, they want me alive, Colton. They won't shoot. He hated it. Hated it so much he could hardly breathe. But she was right. An hour later, she rode alone through the pass, a white cloth tied to her rifle like a surrender flag. I'm here, she shouted. Let the men go. All eyes fixed on her. No one looked up the cliffs behind the gunmen, where Colton and his sharpshooters lay hidden. Now, Colton roared. 10 rifles fired from above. The ambushers never stood a chance. Within minutes, they fled, leaving the pass open. Colton slid down the rocks, breathless. Abigail galloped to him. He pulled her from the saddle and kissed her like a man who had almost lost his whole world. The drive continued. When they reached Casper, the cattle sold for more money than Colton had ever seen. Over $100,000. Enough to free the ranch. Enough to defy Rock. Abigail smiled for the first time without fear. We did it. We did, Colton said. But when they stepped onto the main street, their triumph froze. A wall of men blocked the path. In the center stood Jebediah Rock, the sheriff at his side, Colton Sterling. The sheriff said, voice trembling, I have a warrant for your arrest. For kidnapping Mrs. Abigail Rock. That's a lie, Abigail shouted. Rock smiled coldly. She's delusional. He snapped his fingers. Arrest him. Deputies raised their shotguns. Colton's men tensed, hands hovering near their guns. The whole street could explode with one wrong move. Then Abigail stepped forward, fast. She grabbed Rock by his fine silk cravat, yanked him off balance, and jammed her Colt revolver under his chin. "Don't move," she screamed. The entire town froze. "Sheriff!" she shouted. "You want a criminal? Arrest him. He hired men to kill us." The sheriff hesitated, looked at Colton, then at 20 hardened ranch hands ready to shoot. Finally, he said, "Deputies, stand down." Rock's face turned red with humiliation. "You'll regret this," he snarled.
You already tried, Colton said.
Rock fled the street, slipping in mud, his pride shattered. 6 months later, Colton and Abigail married under the open Montana sky. She wore lace. He wore his best hat. Her Winchester leaned beside the altar. The king of Montana finally had a queen. Not one who wanted his money, one who wanted him. And together they built a life no tycoon, no storm, and no enemy could ever break.